What's up guys, Suris here. So it seems that you guys wanted a girl-defined response video for your Tuesday video. I ran a separate poll on Twitter, and that poll seems to have favored a Master Apologist video. So Master Apologist will be tomorrow, and girl-defined will be today. Before we get into the video though, I do want to show you guys something. I received my first piece of official fan art from Gaelic Nox on my Discord server. This is obviously not counting some of the amalgamations that Skeptic Pork has made on Twitter. So a huge thank you to Gaelic for giving me something that gave me a ton of cheer when I saw it. Although trust me, I'm nowhere near as attractive as this Disney-esque avatar. If you guys ever want to chat with me or submit fan art or do anything like that, then all that can be done through my Discord server. I also hop into the voice chat over there occasionally, so if you guys want to chat with me there, that is also something you can do. Alright, enough of all that. Let's go ahead and hop right into the video.
It's just Kristen here at Girl Defined today, and in this vlog, I'm going to be personally sharing with you 6 things every Christian girl needs to know before getting married.
Oh, that actually sounds incredibly useful. Let's see where you go with this.
So number 1, your husband or future husband isn't the answer to your happiness.
I mean, that's partially true. You are responsible for your own happiness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a partner can't be a source of happiness for you. But let's see where you go with this.
Now, I know that may seem kind of basic, but I remember back as a single girl, I really actually bought into that idea that Zach was going to be the one that would ultimately fulfill me and make me so happy. Even though, as a Christian, I knew, like, okay, God is the source of my satisfaction.
Oh, now I see where you're going with this.
Unknowingly, I was placing a lot of my expectation and fulfillment on Zach. And so as a single girl right now thinking of marriage, you may be thinking, you know, I'm single and if only I could get a boyfriend or get married one day, get engaged, then I would be finally happy. That guy would be the answer to this hole in my heart. And guess what? I remember feeling that at times too, but the truth is now that I've been married for the past 6 years, husbands, boyfriends, they do not bring you that ultimate happiness, that ultimate satisfaction that you long for. So if you're getting married thinking that your husband is going to be the source of your happiness, then you're buying into a lie that's only going to lead you down a road of despair, discouragement, and unfulfilled longings.
Okay, so I agree with you so far. If you're constantly looking for your happiness to come solely from another individual, then yes, you're going to end up going down a road of destruction. But there are some people who do glean a lot of their happiness from other people. Their happiness could come directly from hanging out with their friends or from dating somebody who they love. There are polyamorous people where their primary source of happiness comes from compersion. But I have a feeling that you're going to try to loop this all back to God somehow.
Because God is truly the only one that can fulfill us and bring us that inner joy that we desire.
Yep, that's exactly where it went. The thing that disappoints me most about this type of argumentation isn't necessarily that it's just flawed, it's that it's kind of an open letter for abuse. Because ultimately, your source of satisfaction from her point of view is not going to come from somebody who, you know, is dating you and loves you and can actually hold a conversation with you. No, your ultimate source of satisfaction is going to come from somebody who can't respond when you text. There's nothing worse than texting your crush and being left on red, but I'd argue that it gets infinitely worse when you're trying to send something to the creator of all things who's omniscient and omnipresent, so he should have no problem responding, but you can't even get a read message. You don't even know that he listened. And to say that the ultimate source of happiness comes from somebody who can't even text back, it seems like a way of normalizing the silent treatment. So while I agree with the actual point of number 1, that maybe you shouldn't look for somebody else to be the reason that you're happy, your ultimate reason for thinking this is just bullshit.
And that takes us right into number 2, which is this. God is truly your only source of lasting fulfillment.
Ah, yes. Going back to my previous point, I had the most fulfilling conversation with God. I gave him a 3-paragraph expose on how I felt about him, and he didn't respond. Ever. For years. I think he truly understood what I was trying to tell him.
Now, I had to learn this the hard way, unfortunately. So early in my first year of marriage, like I said, I was looking to Zach to be my happiness maker, to complete me, you know, whatever. And so in those moments, I would take my eyes off of God and instead place them on Zach. And that never led anywhere good. It just led to discouragement and I felt more unfulfilled than before.
Okay, but why? In what particular way did you look away from God and look to your husband instead? Things like being spiritual and looking to God and anything like that usually seem to have incredibly vapid explanations. And if they don't have non-explanations, they happen to have explanations that are so subjective to the individual as to be useless on the whole. So are you going to get into that?
It's in those moments when in my life, and especially in the past 6 years of marriage, that I've seen more clearly than ever that God is truly the only source of fulfillment for me, the ultimate source of satisfaction.
Okay, you still haven't said why. All I'm gleaning from this so far is that your husband doesn't satisfy you.
Getting married is wonderful, and there's so many joys and blessings in that, but my husband cannot fulfill me the way that God can. And so when I look to God and I work on a daily relationship with him through reading his word, through prayer, when I'm walking in a faithful relationship with God, guess what? I feel so fulfilled and so content more than ever before. And God, he's our creator. He's designed to give us something that earthly husbands, boyfriends, they can't give us. God is the only one who can truly fulfill us. So right now as a single girl, I challenge you, even before you're married, to start working on developing a strong, deep, constant, consistent relationship with God that you can take into your marriage, because that is going to be the thing that ultimately brings you fulfillment.
So you said that God is able to give you things that your husband can't, and the only thing that I've been able to see that God can give that nobody else can be forced to give is the silent treatment. Because eventually, even if your husband is giving you the silent treatment, you can at least elicit a response, usually by poking with a stick, though I wouldn't recommend doing so. But instead of actually saying what it is that God can give you that no one else can, you simply say that it's fulfillment. But literally anything can fulfill you. I felt incredibly fulfilled during my first playthrough of Undertale. I can go to the local hibachi restaurant and not only feel filled, but fulfilled. I can feel fulfilled in myself after doing a good job in a game of League of Legends with my girlfriend and close friends. Fulfillment is something that literally anything can give you as long as it fits the criteria for fulfillment that you need. But again, that makes it also incredibly subjective. The things that can fulfill me aren't the things that are going to fulfill you, and so far, the only thing that I can tell that fulfills you is, again, ye old cold shoulder silent treatment. So far, this doesn't sound like good advice for maintaining a good relationship, considering that one of the most important parts is communication.
And number 3, you won't magically mature once you're married. So before I was married, I kind of had this idea that like, oh, once you get married, you suddenly become mature.
Where the hell did you get that idea from? No, seriously. For those who got married, that's wonderful for you, but personally, I don't see any need for it. It's literally just a slip of paper. It's a legal document. To me, there's functionally no difference between being married and simply being in a relationship with somebody and living in the same house. The only thing that piece of paper can serve to be is a threat that if you two break up, one of you might owe alimony. Not necessarily something that I care for. So what fundamentally would that legal document have changed for your personality?
Now you're basically grown up and you're a missus and all of these things that I just thought somehow I was going to be like a different person after marriage, and I imagined that person being really mature, wise, godly, like all these things.
Yeah, no, none of those things.
And then I got married and woke up the next day, and guess what? I was the exact same person. I was the same girl who had all the same struggles, the same impatient issues, the same selfishness issues. And I recognized, oh, so the person I was before I got married, like that's the exact same person with all the same sin problems as after marriage?
Oh, of course, she loops it back to the God thing again, for reasons. You had all the same problems you did before because that piece of paper literally can't change anything, and yet here you are realizing that you had the same problems with sin, as in they're as non-existent before as they are now.
So if you are buying into that same lie as me,
I would be careful with your phrasing here. I have a feeling there are quite a few lies you espouse that multiple people agree with.
That, oh, one day when you get married, then you'll suddenly magically mature and become this godly woman. It doesn't happen. So the things that you're struggling with right now, maybe in your family, with your friends, impatience, ingratitude, selfishness, whatever it is, those are the exact same things that you're going to struggle with after marriage unless you work on developing those like godly character.
Godly character? Oh, so you mean genocidal maniac. If I were to develop the type of godly character that you're talking about, so a character aligned with Yahweh, then I would be perfectly okay annihilating everyone on Earth except like 8 people. You know, as long as they built a boat. The same godly character that's also okay with slavery. And if you guys want to hear my thoughts on biblical slavery, then I'll be doing a video about that probably next week. Anyway, my point is, the last type of character that I would want at all is a biblical godlike character. I feel like if I had a character like that, I would probably be sent to jail pretty quickly.
Now, unless you start working on those things now, then you will take them into your marriage. So I challenge you and encourage you to look at your life, look at the areas of weakness, maybe the way you interact with your siblings, like is it godly, is it patient, is it loving, like look at the way that you interact with friends, are you self-focused, are you others-focused, whatever it is, look at your character, look at your actions, and analyze that and see, where do I need to grow? Where do I need to become more godly? Because that the woman that you are before you get married is the exact same woman that you're going to be after you get married.
So, much like with point 1, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't agree with what you're meaning, because the biblical undertones here are a little scummy.
And number 4, being totally independent doesn't create marital unity. So just like you, I'm growing up in this culture where we're being told as women that we need to be totally independent. It's our way or the highway. We need to make a name for ourselves. We don't need anybody. We can do it all on our own. That's really the mindset of our culture that we as women are encouraged to embrace. But sadly, when you get into marriage, that kind of super extreme independent mindset doesn't really work.
So the issue I have here is that women, and practically anyone of any gender at all, should be independent. You should be an independent person who's able to do your own thing. This idea of independence doesn't mean that you shouldn't have people that you can depend on, but it should be a can. Obviously, if you find yourself in a situation where you have to depend on somebody, then that's fine. You have found yourself in a situation where you have to. But if you're in a marriage, it shouldn't be that you have to rely on that other person. It should be that you want to. You can do a lot of things on your own, and you should be able to, but you should want your partner as well. This idea of shoulds there really bothers me, because I think that nothing in a relationship should be compulsory except, being faithful. Everything else should come down to a matter of wants.
It doesn't create marital unity. Instead, you come into marriage, and I did this, you come into marriage with more of like a competition mindset. Like, you start to view your husband when you disagree as almost a competitor.
Why would you do that? I mean, if you think that you're right in any given conversation, then obviously stand up for what you think and make compromises where you have to. But why would anybody go into marriage thinking that it's a competition? I understand this is advice you're trying to give to other people based on your own experiences, but I don't think this is an experience that happens all that often.
And rather than working together as a team and striving for unity, striving to be selfless and serve the other, you instead demand your way and demand your rights. And so for me, if I could just encourage you, if there's something I wish I had worked on more before marriage, it would be to have cultivated more of a selfless, others-focused heart instead of such an independent, self-focused mindset. So I encourage you, instead of embracing what the culture says a strong woman is, instead embrace what God says a strong woman is, which is a bold and courageous woman for His truth, but also a woman who is selfless, sacrificial, and shows genuine Christ-like love. That will create so much more marital unity in your future marriage than embracing a self-focused, independent mindset.
Again, you start to make a cogent point, but then you loop it back to God, and it makes your entire argument fall apart. While I can somewhat agree with your point about the independent mindset, there should definitely be some level of compromise when it comes to relationships. Like I said before, I think that letting both people in the relationship, or as many people happen to be in the relationship, exercise a level of independence is a good thing. It's a healthy thing, honestly. And I understand that you're trying to be very counterculture, saying that don't be what the culture tells you to be what the Bible tells you to be, but I'm gonna be honest, the Bible doesn't exactly grant women a whole lot of rights. I don't think that I would really say that any woman should be a biblical woman. In fact, through a lot of the Bible, women in general are treated like property, and in fact there are instances where if a woman is violated against her will, her assailant has to marry her. So, no, I think the last thing that any woman should be is a biblical woman. I would rather her be an independent, free-thinking person who is willing to stand up for herself. Because if you walk into marriage with this mindset that you should be a self-sacrificing person, then you're going to get yourself abused and manipulated.
And number 5, domestic skills are extremely useful. Now, I know some of you might be thinking like, okay, what in the world domestic skills? Like, what does that even mean? Well, back in my early years of marriage, I had some domestic skills. Like, I could do dishes and I could make a few meals. But honestly, like, I didn't have a ton of skills. Grocery planning, like budgeting, how to clean and do things real efficiently, how to manage and run an entire home, scheduling, like all of these things I was honestly not very good at, because before I got married, I kind of viewed those things as lesser than, and so I didn't put a lot of time and practice into developing a lot of domestic skills. And honestly, when you get married, you are gonna realize like, wow, so much of your life is centered around where you live.
Wait, you didn't live on your own beforehand? You didn't realize that grocery planning would be useful? What world did you live in where that wasn't a thing that you knew how to do? Like, unless you just went straight out of childhood and got married at 18 and then immediately moved into a house with your husband, then it would seem to me that these are just general things that a thinking, breathing human being would have to be able to do. So while I might agree with this point, I don't think this point actually has anything to do with marriage. I think this point has to do with just being a functioning adult.
Your home. And in God's word, we actually see that God places a high value and importance on the home, and specifically calls women to be good keepers of the home.
Oh, now I see why you made the point. It's not necessarily because you think that these are things that everybody needs to know before getting into marriage, it's because the Bible says to be a good housewife. This is again going back to the issue that I have with the biblical definition of a woman. I'm sorry, but you don't have to be a good housewife. Your husband could take on all of those duties just fine. Whatever domestic situation you find yourself in, as long as you and your partner are agreeable on that domestic situation, then there's no reason that you can't just go ahead and do whatever it is you want to do. If your boyfriend enjoys doing the dishes, but the girlfriend doesn't want to do the dishes, then congratulations, you have found yourself in a situation where the boy's doing the dishes. Of course, in this particular example, I'm strictly talking about heterosexual couples, so if you want the argument to expand outward, then insert whichever gender that you need to. The guy does the shopping and the non-binary stays home. The gender fluid goes to work, and the woman vacuums the house. Whatever situation you find yourself in, as long as you and your partner are agreeable on it, it doesn't matter.
We see in Titus 2, and God also commands hospitality all throughout the scripture. And so if there's one thing I could go back and work on, it would honestly be so many of the essential domestic skills that will become so highly valuable if you develop them in your future marriage. And number 6, selflessness is the key to a vibrant marriage.
I hope you're going to talk about compromise and not about self-sacrifice.
So Zach and I always joke because before we got married, we would have considered ourselves to be pretty selfless. And then after we got married, it's like we woke up and I don't know what happened. Someone stole my brain because I suddenly became the most selfish person on the planet. And Zach would say the same thing about himself. And I think what happens is that you wake up and now you're on this other side of marriage and you have this other person who's actually a sinner and you're a sinner, and now there's a conflict of interest.
Okay, stop. This you're a sinner, he's a sinner, none of that is relevant to this conversation at all. If you're both human beings, even by the definitions of your religion, you're all sinners. It's literally an irrelevant point. What I suspect has actually happened is that since you said that you didn't have many domestic skills going in and you didn't think that you would need them, you probably found yourself in a situation where you were suddenly having to share space with another human being, and you were having to share space in such a way that you were not familiar with. That is the reason that you people found out that you were more selfish than you thought you were. It has literally nothing to do with Jesus and sin. Stop trying to shove sin into your narrative.
You both see things differently. You're a man and a woman, and so you approach so many things in life quite differently.
Generally speaking, men and women only approach these things differently because we've been taught to do so. If you don't believe me, go ahead and look at the history of blue and pink and gender correlation. Historically, blue was a female color and pink was considered a masculine color until the powers that be decided that it would be better marketed the other way around. You'd be surprised how much of this masculine versus feminine crap society has taught you.
And you start to want your way more than ever. And now to give sacrificially, to just, say, hey, it's okay, we can do things your way, that becomes really hard as you're living day in, day out with this same person. And so I want to encourage you as a single girl to really start cultivating a heart of selflessness, an others-focused heart, because that is truly the key to a vibrant marriage. When you and your future husband are both seeking to serve one another and love one another sacrificially, that is when marriage is just thriving, when it's vibrant. For Zach and me, that has been so true in the past 6 years. When we each have an others-focused mindset, our marriage is awesome. But when we both give into our selfishness and instead look at how we can get rather than give, our marriage really suffers and we really struggle.
So I get this idea that you need to sacrifice for your other person, but that sounds like one of the worst ways that you could possibly word it. In fact, the only possible way I could see that you would need to word this as sacrifice as opposed to the word I would use, which is compromise, is that sacrifice sounds just a little bit more biblical, considering the Jesus narrative. I suspect that that's the case. You guys can let me know in the comment section below whether you think it's right.
And so I want to encourage you right now as a single girl, even if you think you're not that selfish, chances are you probably are, right? Because we're all pretty selfish. So I encourage you right now to start looking for ways in how you are being selfish, and then pray and ask God to help you instead have a selfless, others-focused heart.
And here we go. It has looped back to God again. It's almost like, as I said before, number 6 could have just been labeled as compromise and talked about the various ways that you and your husband have had to compromise to make your relationship work. Instead, we live in a world where the narrative had to be about sacrifice because that's more biblical, and then it looped back into asking God and praying. If you really need a change for your relationship, that change is going to come from within. It's not going to come because you appealed to a higher power.
And start cultivating that and working on that right now in your family and with your friend groups. So there you have it, 6 things that every Christian girl needs to know before getting married.
Or a more apt name would be 6 half-truths that I'm going to tell you about marriage, given that most of these ended up being almost correct until you started smuggling the Bible in. I get that the audience that you aimed this video for was Christians, but even then, I find it maybe a little abusive to try to get people to rely on a deity that, by the way, doesn't answer back. You're not going to get very good tips from your eternally silent godly benefactor. But that's my take on this. I think that the advice in this video is only half true, and honestly, half-truths are a little worse than lies in my book, in that half-truths are a whole lot easier to manipulate people with. But what did you guys think? Let me know what you thought in the comment section below, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Remember to check out the description below for all of my usual links, including the link to my Discord server, and I will see you tomorrow for Master Apologist 2.